Latin America is known for its breathtaking landscapes, titillating dancing, great food, and vibrant cultures, and the odd drug lord or two. However, beneath its surface beauty lies a stark reality. Many countries in this region face significant economic challenges, leading to widespread poverty. While some might assume that all of America, including Latin America, is prosperous, the truth is quite different. Imagine a bustling city, its streets filled not with the laughter of children playing or the chatter of market vendors, but with long queues of weary faces, their eyes hollow with hunger and desperation. This is not an isolated sight, but a pervasive image across many Latin American countries. Unemployment rates soar uncontrollably, pushing families into poverty's suffocating grip. Inflation spirals out of control, transforming simple groceries into unaffordable luxuries. Debt burdens weigh down entire nations, suffocating their potential for growth and progress. This isn't just an economic downturn, it's a systemic collapse, a symphony of hardship playing out across borders. Brazil, for example, witnesses food lines doubling in length, while Venezuela grapples with the highest patient count globally, their healthcare systems buckling under the strain. In Colombia, once safe neighborhoods echo with the sounds of violence as crime rates skyrocket alongside poverty. Behind every door lies a tale of struggle, a family fighting against impossible odds to survive another day. So, how did Latin America, with its rich natural resources and cultural heritage, end up in this state? And what factors have contributed to the shared blueprint of economic struggles among these nations? Countries like Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela may seem less prosperous compared to major powers like Germany, France, or the United Kingdom, though the reality is quite surprising. Back in the first half of the 20th century, Latin American countries were actually thriving hubs of prosperity, akin to the United States. Latin America became a land of opportunity for many Europeans seeking a better life. Thousands of Spaniards, Italians, French, and even Germans left their homes in pursuit of the Latin American dream. It might sound unbelievable, but until the middle of the last century, Latin American nations were as affluent as, if not wealthier than, the major European powers. However, starting from the 1950s, something changed. These countries began to stagnate and fell significantly behind economically. What's particularly intriguing is that Latin America's economic challenges didn't just affect a few countries. The entire region seemed to suffer simultaneously, without exceptions. What happened? There are several explanations. One theory suggests that Latin America's initial economic success in the early 20th century paradoxically led to its downfall. Countries like Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela struggled to manage their rapid economic growth, ultimately leading to a cycle of poverty. They became victims of their own success, unable to sustain their prosperity. November 21st, 1947, in Havana, Cuba. A group of influential political figures gathered under the UN banner and made a decision that altered Latin America's economic trajectory forever. This decision marked the beginning of the economic challenges faced by Latin Americans in the following years. To understand the significance of that meeting in Havana, we need to look back at Latin America's history. Between the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, Latin America was known as the breadbasket of the world. The region's vast and fertile lands produced Argentine meat, Colombian coffee, Brazilian rubber, and minerals like Chilean copper, forming the foundation of its economic success. In the 19th century, capitalism reshaped the global landscape, splitting it into two major camps: Europe and the USA, bustling with industrial growth, and Latin America, primarily focused on raw material extraction. Initially, this arrangement seemed harmonious, fueling prosperity on both sides. However, a significant shift unfolded between the 1930s and 1950s. A group of economists, known as the structuralists led by Raúl Prebisch, challenged the status quo. They argued that Latin America needed to break away from its reliance on raw materials and pivot towards industrial production. Think cars, machinery, and more. This idea seemed counterintuitive, given the success of Latin American economies built on exporting raw goods. So, why the change? There were three key reasons. First, the prices of raw materials, especially agricultural ones, started plummeting over time. This downward trend threatened the profitability of agriculture, raising concerns about long-term economic viability. Second, relying heavily on the primary sector like farming made Latin America vulnerable to natural disasters, which could wreak havoc on the agricultural economy. However, the third and most critical reason was the region's over-reliance on foreign industries. Latin American nations lacked robust domestic industries to produce essential goods, technologies, or machinery. This dependence on foreign suppliers left them vulnerable. Any disruption, be it a currency crisis, internal conflict, or political standoff, could trigger severe economic repercussions due to this dependency. The structuralists were deeply concerned about the recurring exchange rate crises of their time. During periods of low agricultural exports caused by poor harvests or natural disasters, foreign currencies such as the dollar would stop flowing in. This lack of foreign currency meant local companies couldn't import the goods they needed, as they simply didn't have the dollars to make these purchases abroad. This situation often led to severe economic recessions. In essence, the structuralists identified three major problems with Latin America's reliance on commodities: vulnerability to exchange rate crises, exposure to fluctuations in agricultural exports due to natural disasters, and the resulting inability to import crucial goods during tough times. These challenges pushed the structuralists to a stark conclusion. If Latin America wanted sustained economic progress, it had to move away from its agricultural dependency and embrace industrialization on a massive scale. Now the question arose: how could this industrial transformation be achieved? And was it possible for this process to unfold gradually over time? The urgency of the situation demanded a more accelerated and deliberate approach. This is where the Havana meeting came into play. Political leaders from Latin America gathered to devise a strategy for industrializing the region and reshaping its economy. Their plan, known as Import Substitution Industrialization, abbreviated as ISI, aimed to reduce reliance on imports by producing the goods domestically. However, despite initial optimism, this model turned out to be one of the biggest failures in the region's economic history. It didn't lead to the expected economic boom, but instead contributed significantly to the persistent economic challenges faced by many Latin American countries today, ultimately becoming a major factor in why these countries struggle with widespread poverty. The ISI model was a strategy that essentially banned foreign goods and encouraged citizens to buy products made within Latin American borders. The idea was that by supporting local businesses exclusively, these businesses would thrive, leading to overall economic development. To achieve this goal, governments implemented three key measures that completely reshaped the market dynamics. Firstly, they imposed hefty tariffs and trade barriers on imported consumer goods. For instance, if you wanted to purchase a car or a washing machine from a foreign country like Germany, you could end up paying double the price due to tariffs. This strategy aimed to make it extremely challenging for citizens to opt for foreign products. However, there was an exception to these strict measures. Industrial companies seeking to import machinery and technology from abroad were exempt from these tariffs. Secondly, the government encouraged these companies to invest in foreign technology by offering favorable exchange rates. This approach allowed local industries to leverage advanced technology from overseas, leading to rapid development and easier market penetration. The core idea behind ISI was to replace foreign products with local ones, requiring significant support and privileges for national industries to kickstart their operations. Of course, these privileges came at a cost. To facilitate the easy import of foreign technology, local companies needed access to a substantial amount of dollars. These dollars were obtained by harming export-oriented companies through unfavorable exchange rates. The ISI prioritized a strong domestic market. This meant creating a self-sufficient industry that didn't rely heavily on imports. However, this strategy came with drawbacks. Latin American governments imposed numerous obstacles for foreign companies looking to establish factories in the region. This wasn't just about promoting local industries, but also ensuring they were owned and operated by local entrepreneurs rather than foreign investors. This approach had its challenges. Setting up advanced factories in new sectors required expertise and skilled labor, which local entrepreneurs often lacked. Imagine trying to start a car or airplane manufacturing company from scratch without prior experience. It's a daunting task that requires substantial investment and risk-taking. Latin American governments, grappling with a pressing dilemma, devised a creative yet risky solution. They established public enterprises in daring ways, venturing into territories where private firms hesitated to invest. Predictably, this endeavor led to substantial debt accumulation, a familiar tale in economic circles. This brings us to the third component of the ISI strategy. To bolster local businesses, governments showered them with various forms of assistance. These included subsidies, tax breaks, customized infrastructure development, direct state investments, and access to low-cost credit. This generosity came at a hefty price for the public treasury. Debt soared, prompting governments to resort to printing money to foot the bill. These three pivotal measures formed the backbone of the ISI approach, yet they also laid the groundwork for Latin America's profound economic setback. The burning question is, why did this strategy fail? On one side of the coin, government-backed public companies turned into a real mess. Instead of focusing on their core functions, many became tools for political favoritism. They hired based on connections rather than skills, turning some into mere puppets for electoral gains. These companies were often pushed to sell goods at rock-bottom prices, which made it impossible for them to make profits or even survive. Corruption, red tape, and a lack of expertise turned them into non-functional entities, unable to produce anything of value efficiently. Meanwhile, let's not forget how the government made life hard for the export businesses. The aim was to prop up local industries, but the result was a disaster. Many small exporters were crushed under the weight of these policies. Argentina, for instance, bled millions in export revenues in 1951 and took a painful 12 years to bounce back by 1963. All this played into the hands of a few big local players. They became rent seekers, living off government handouts and using their influence to squash competition. With little know-how in the industrial sector, products from Latin American factories were subpar, limited in variety, and priced way above global standards. They simply couldn't keep up, and that's not all. Governments went overboard with printing money, leading to rampant inflation and a mountain of foreign debt. It was a recipe for economic disaster, plain and simple. It's quite intriguing how, by the 1970s, people had begun to realize that the ISI model was a huge mistake. Despite this, many countries in Latin America stuck to this failed approach, repeatedly trying it without much success. Interestingly, even today in places like Argentina, there's still a strong fear of foreign trade and a strong preference for supporting local industries. Why did this persist, even after the ISI model clearly failed? While Latin American countries were grappling with the ISI model, there was another part of the world also eager to industrialize. We're talking about East Asian countries like Taiwan and South Korea. What sets them apart is that they didn't follow the same path as Latin America. Instead, they embraced export-oriented industrialization, EOI. Now, what's EOI? Well, it's a model that focuses on helping local industries compete globally rather than shielding them from international competition. Unlike the ISI model, which aimed to protect domestic industries, EOI encouraged local businesses to sell their products abroad. This Asian model was much more open to international markets, welcoming foreign investment and leveraging low-cost labor. And guess what? It worked wonders for them. Today, countries like South Korea and Taiwan are thriving and boast companies like Samsung and TSMC, which have become global successes. So, why didn't Latin American countries switch to this successful Asian model when ISI wasn't working out? Well, many of the Asian nations had predominantly agrarian economies with a populace living mainly in rural areas. As a result, one strategy they employed to boost their exports was currency devaluation. This practice made their currency cheaper, enticing foreign buyers to purchase more goods from them. This was particularly advantageous for farmers, making it easier for them to sell their products abroad. On the contrary, Latin America faced a different scenario. The region had a more affluent population, with a substantial portion residing in urban centers. Consequently, devaluations were not well received, especially among workers who did not directly benefit from them. Many saw devaluations as favoring export-oriented businesses and rural elites at the expense of the working class. It's crucial to note that wages in Latin American countries were significantly higher than those in Asian nations at the time. This posed a challenge for Latin American countries to compete in the international market using the same export model based on cheap labor. This approach would have come with severe consequences in Latin America, such as inflation and political backlash, as it would have required cutting welfare programs and benefits for the people. Implementing an export model akin to the Asian one would have meant sacrificing short-term welfare for potential long-term gains. Politically, this was a tough sell for leaders, as it involved significant costs and risks without guaranteed outcomes, plus the possibility of being ousted. Asian countries were less affected by these challenges due to their economic conditions and political landscapes. They were not as burdened by the costs of devaluations, and their leaders were not as influenced by corruption or elite interests. Countries like South Korea and Taiwan had endured war conflicts, occupations, and social revolutions, which led to a more equitable distribution of power and resources at that time. This lack of powerful elites enabled these countries to navigate economic strategies more efficiently compared to Latin American nations. Looking at Latin America's situation, we can see how the ISI model played out. This model encouraged big local industrial players to focus on making things locally instead of relying heavily on imports. It was supposed to boost local industries and create more jobs. However, it didn't turn out as expected. The challenge with the ISI model was that it required the wealthy industrial elites to give up some of their privileges. This meant stepping away from the comfort of their established positions. Unfortunately, Latin American politics wasn't exactly known for its resistance to corruption or their unbiased approach toward the elites. But does this mean Latin America had no other options? Couldn't it have leveraged its resources and explored alternative models like South Korea or Taiwan did? Well, theoretically, yes. Adopting a different approach could have been a game changer. However, there's a catch. Switching to a model like South Korea's or Taiwan's would have required significant changes from both the industrial elites and the political class. It wouldn't have been a walk in the park. They would have had to rethink their strategies and adapt to a more open and competitive environment. Unfortunately, many in the elite and political circles weren't ready for such a drastic shift. They were comfortable with the status quo, even if it meant staying stuck in a model that wasn't delivering the desired results. This is the main reason why Latin American countries remain trapped in the ISI model. It was a model that lacked a clear path to a prosperous future, and in many ways, kept the region mired in poverty. Have a different perspective? Share it with us in the comments section. And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest content.